For some reason, I went from watching One Tree Hill to Pretty Little Liars, so I finally got out of my Pretty Little Liars coma, and I'm now filming. So today, I will be finally talking about my May wrap-up. I'm going to be ranking all of my books from least favorite to most favorite. I don't think I've ever ranked my readings before, but I thought it would be fun. I see a lot of people ranking a lot of things, so I want to rank my books because I think they're fun. I love rankings. I just watched Kari Can Read's like ranking YA and new adult, and I was obsessed. And that video is kind of old, but I was like obsessed. So I was like, okay, why don't I just rank my wrap up? So that's what we're gonna be doing. I read 17 books in May, which is really good because I have not read that many books all year in 1 month. Like, that's actually my best month this year, which is kind of sad because I usually read like 25 to 40 books a month, but I'm already picking back up. Like, it's like the third and I've already read 4 books. I'm actually on my 5th and 6th book right now, so I am so happy. I can't wait. I'm trying to prepare for the mid-year freakout tag. Y'all know that's my favorite tag of the year, and I gotta bring out a book. So mine's probably gonna come a little late just because I want to read more books and like I want to make sure I'm able to like answer the questions. But anyways, let's just get into the wrap up. So I have 3 2-stars, 9 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 2 5-stars. So this reading month was very much average, but some of the 3 stars I kind of want to make 4 stars, but I also don't because this year I'm being harsher with my ratings. The lowest ranked book for May is Finn by Stephen King. This is an Audible exclusive. This is a very short story. Like, I think I listened to the audiobook within like 30 minutes. It's a very short story about this guy named Finn who has the worst luck ever. Relatable. And he ends up getting kidnapped and like tortured, and they think that he's someone else. And I don't want to spoil it just in case you want to waste your time and read it. It was terrible. It was Stephen King's worst work yet, I assume. It does not feel like Stephen King at all. If you told me a ghostwriter wrote that book, I would believe them. And I feel like the ghostwriter, well, I feel like it's smart to put the name under Stephen King and not the ghostwriter, because yikes. But I'm gonna disrespect Stephen King like that and say that he has a ghostwriter, because that's definitely not the case. But it just like, it was not something I would ever read again, or it was terrible. Then I read The Never King, which is a dark romance book. It is a Peter Pan retelling. It is about this generation of women who always get kidnapped by like Peter Pan, and Peter Pan has lost something. Like, I think they lost like magic, or they lost something, and the darlings, that's like the generations of Wendy, the darlings like can help him get it back, but every darling he's kidnapped has not been able to help. And Winnie, our main character, is the one that he kidnaps for, you know, her generation, and she ends up going to Neverland and she ends up meeting the Lost Boys. It is very smutty. I get this one 2 stars because I didn't like it. Some of the smut scenes came out of nowhere. Like, they literally kidnapped her. Like, they kidnapped her, and then the smut scenes start off like super fast. It was a really short book, and I just felt like it was moving like way too fast. Like I said, the smut scene, and like there's this one character who's like crazy, but like he's like, I love crazy, but he's too crazy for me. And you know, I love Peter Pan, and like Peter Pan in this one, like he just, I don't know. And I just keep thinking about the smut scenes and how like random they were, and it just didn't make any sense to me. And then my next 2-star read is Book of Nights, which I unhauled. So it's in my unhaul pile, and I'm about to dig through that just to show y'all how terrible the book is. Sorry. So yeah, Book of Night is about this girl named Charlie, and she lives in this world where people can like do like shadow magic and control shadows. She is a pickpocket, and one day someone from her past comes back to get her back into that pickpocket job. She also is a bartender. And I thought the book was bad. I did not go into this book thinking that it was going to be anything like The Folk of the Air. Thank God I didn't, because I would have been even more disappointed. But it's an adult book, so why would you go in thinking that, you know? And I knew there wasn't going to be any romance just because it didn't hint at any romances in the synopsis. And it was just funny, like reading everyone's reviews, like, oh my gosh, like I know the romance is about to be so good. And then you read the book and there's no romance, and you're just like, But I just thought the book was very boring, and they live in this world where it's like magical, but for some reason doing tarot cards is like scamming, like it's fake. And as someone who does tarot cards in real life, there's nothing fake about tarot cards. Like you can't scam people with tarot cards. Like that just doesn't make sense. So I felt like in the book, being in a magical world and making tarot cards a scamming thing just kind of irritated me a lot, and I kind of felt disrespected, I'm not gonna lie. And it's like so sad because when I first read the book, like there was this chapter and it was called King of Cups in Reverse, and I ended up taking this picture and it was like with my King of Cups card and like in reverse, and like she actually did her research. Like she knows what she's talking about, like the things that okay, so her sister's the one who does tarot cards, and the things that her sister was saying that like the cards meant to that person was right. Like there's nothing scamming about tarot cards. Like literally every card has a meaning, and what comes out is like what is for the, I don't know, I didn't want to get into like that. Like it just irritated me. I didn't like how that storyline went, and then also it was just very boring in general. Like there was just no oomph to it. But I will say, if nobody knows, The Stolen Heir, which is the like spin-off of The Folk of the Air, that's not the series isn't called The Stolen Heir, but it's a spin-off, and it's gonna be about Oak, which if you haven't subscribed to me since, like, you know, The Folk of the Air has became my all-time favorite series, like since it became my brand, you will remember me saying that Oak was gonna get him a spin-off story, and everybody was like, I don't know, and I was right 4 to 5 years later because I know everything. So I already have the Amazon copy pre-ordered, and I'm gonna get the Barnes & Noble copy pre-ordered, but that one actually takes money out and I don't have that, so we're gonna have to wait. But I guess there's some good news that came out of this terrible book, and I hope that the book is just a standalone and she just leaves that where it is, and then she just focuses on the Folk of the Air series, because I don't know what the hell Book of Night was. And now we get into our 3 stars. So the first Dragon's Bride is another book that I read, and obviously it's really hard being like, oh, I gave this one 3 stars, because obviously this is where it ranked. But yeah, I would give this one like the lower end of the 3 stars. This is a novella by Katie Roberts. It is about this girl who is being abused, and she gets this deal with this demon, and he's like, come to my world and, you know, I'll set you free from your abusive ex-husband, because she's on the run. And she's like, at first she's reluctant, but then she's like, all right, whatever. So then she goes off and she's being auctioned off to this dragon, and then they end up living together, and it's like a slow burn. It's a Grumpy Ex Sunshine. It was okay. I feel like as a novella, you have to be a really good author to be able to write a novella, because there's so many things you have to hit, and then there's a certain time that you have to hit those things. Like, you know, you want to hit like the romance aspect, but you also like the world building, because I don't know anything about this world, and like I'm very interested in like the dragon world, but she didn't get to go into that because it's a novella. So all it was like smut and like romance, and I'm like, cool, but you have this cool dragon idea, like let's expand that. That's the hard thing about being a fantasy romance lover, is because authors don't really do a balance of fantasy and romance. It's usually more romance than fantasy, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but I want to know more about this world. But that's also because I'm a fantasy reader itself, so sometimes it's hard reading fantasy romance, because I'm like, the authors aren't focusing on things that I want them to focus on. Like, I want to know more about the dragons, I want to know more. And then there's also like, I'm not gonna hold you up, like I'm not a big monster boyfriend girl. Like, you know, I do have my monster boyfriend like Goodreads list, but I'm not that big of a monster boyfriend girl. So like certain monsters, yeah, like demons, cool. I have read a book where it's like a dragon, and I like how that was written, because he's a human but he can turn into a dragon, whereas the Dragon's Bride, he's like a full dragon, and I'm just like trying to picture it, and like some of the sex scenes, I'm not gonna lie, scared me, because they were talking about like his body parts, and I was just sitting there like trying to picture it, and I'm just sitting there like terrified. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. But then I read Under One Roof, which is Ali Hazelwood's next book. Allie Hazelwood is going to be a one-hit wonder for me. I don't think she can ever top The Love Hypothesis. I have read her other like book that, you know, should be released at some point. I read it. I got an early arc of it. I read it months ago. It was okay. I think I talked about it in like whatever my last wrap up is. I talked about it then. But Under One Roof is about this girl, and she has this roommate and she's in love with him, but she's like leaving, and like she wants to like profess her love to him, but she's like, and yeah, it just follows that. And like it was cute, but it read exactly like a fan fiction. Like I was reading my Druid and Makari fanfiction on Tumblr, you know, from the Eternals. I'm obsessed with them. I was reading them on Tumblr. I said, oh, let me go read Under One Roof. It's like I didn't even switch apps, because, you know, I read on my Kindle. It's like I didn't even switch from Tumblr to my Kindle. It's like it literally read exactly how a fanfiction is. And I just feel like that's not acceptable in like a romance book, like a published book, you know. Like I feel like because you're published, it should be a lot less fan fiction-y, because if I want to read fan fiction, I would go to Tumblr. And then it's also like, I know all of her books are fan fictions of the Star Wars characters. I forgot their names, but I know they're all fan fictions of him with different faces and like different personalities a little bit. And also the main character in the story had the most annoying personality I have ever. I hate that like quirky girl personality. I hate that every time an author writes a book, they always have to have a quirky girl, like a romance author. Whenever romance authors write series, they always have to have the quirky girl personality. Like it can't ever just be like they just write like, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like when authors write, I feel like when romance authors write books, they're like, okay, well, what personality trait should we give her? Okay, well, this one I'm going to do the quirky girl, this one I'm going to do the badass girl, this one I'm going to do the girl who's had her heart broken, you know. They always have to do the quirky girl, and you don't have to do that. It's something about the quirky girls. Like I'm a quirky girl, yeah, but it's just something about the hyper quirky girls that just don't do it for me in the romance books, and they're always super annoying. And it's like, I love hyper quirky people in real life, but in books, the way the authors like write them makes them seem childish in a way. And the next book I have is The Test. I read this one because of Kayla. So I think I was either in the live stream or I was watching the live stream. Katie's, I can't remember. Katie does a live stream like every week, and I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I love this. I love reading sprints. Please, more reading sprints. If I gotta subscribe to your Patreon, I gotta subscribe to your Patreon. I don't know. Kayla was talking about it, and I forgot even in what context she was talking about, but she was talking about it, and I was like, that sounds good. And then I read other, oh, she said Black Mirror, and I said, bet, I waste no time. I love Black Mirror. It definitely gave Black Mirror. It is about this guy who is an immigrant, and he's moving to England with his family, and he has to take this test in order to get his citizenship, and something happens. And I don't want to spoil it because I feel like you should go into this not knowing anything about it. I just thought it was okay. Like it was very like, I don't know, it was good. This is also about the same author who wrote The Sleeping Giants, which I've also read. I've only read The Sleeping Giants, and I gave it 4 stars, but I was never interested in continuing on. Oh, we were literally talking about Sleeping Giants in the live stream. That's how this came up. So the next book I have is Guild and Glint. So I would say Guild would be more so at the bottom, and then Glint will be at the top. Now these are some fantasy romance books that have been really hyped. Everyone's been talking about them. This one is about this girl. Her name is something, and she's literally made of gold. This is a King Midas retelling. I love Greek mythology retellings. Yeah, this is a King Midas retelling. It's about this girl who is stuck in this cage, and she is like the king's trophy, and it's just following her. Like, it's not just following her being stuck in this cage. It's really like, it does have a lot of trigger warnings. I read dark romance as a pick-me-up, so to me it wasn't that bad. But it does have like, I would say check the trigger warning because it is bad. Though I'm not to be like, oh my gosh, it's not as bad as everyone said. It wasn't that bad for me, but it is really bad. I just read dark romance because I am insane. So yeah, it was fine. It was kind of boring actually, and I do like the way that the author writes though, because the girl is kidnapped, like she's in a cage and she suffers from Stockholm syndrome, and the way that the author wrote this was so good. In the book, Midas does something really messed up and he's like apologizing to her. Girl, I almost fell for it too. Like I almost was like, well, he's not that bad. And then I'm like thinking about what he did and I'm like, she's really good at that, and like it's showing like the abuse and like the manipulation that he has, and like it was just so good. And then I read Glint, which follows what happens in Guild, and this one was, I liked it a little bit more, but they both were like not that high, just because like they're boring. They have no plot lines. Like I'm so tired of reading fantasy romance books with plot lines. Like please stop writing fantasy romance books just because you like the idea. Like please, like reading a romance book, like a temporary book with no plot, makes sense to me. Reading a fantasy book with no plot is like literally my biggest pet peeve, because how do you have a fantasy book with no plot? Why are you wasting both my time and yours? Might continue on. The white covers or white hardcovers are so beautiful. I need to get my hands on them, so hopefully I like the third book. And like also, if you don't want to actually sit through like the gruesome stuff, the first book could be skipped. I wish somebody would have told me that. I think I would have liked the book a lot more if I would have skipped the first book, because it kind of reads as a prequel, to be honest. So actually I would just suggest that don't even read Guild, just read Glint and then read the rest of the series and then go back and read Guild as a prequel, because yeah, it's not that important. Honestly, you don't really need to read it. So I would say go to Glint first, because Glint was good. There's a good ship in there, has some good smut in there, but I need to read the other book, but it's like 600 pages and I'm not gonna, whatever. The next book I have is Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. Are we surprised? I feel like we should be, because I have history with Colleen Hoover and I haven't liked her previous works, but this one was a newer release, so I decided to give it a try because I think Colleen Hoover is hilarious. I see her on TikTok all the time. She has such a great personality, but her books, like, they're kind of boring for me. So Heartbones is about this girl who, her mom just died and she has to go live with her dad for the summer, and she ends up meeting like this guy named Sam. He lives next door. He's like the rich boy next door and she's like really poor, and like they kind of bond on having the same yet opposite worlds, and they end up forming like a love thing. I thought that book was very boring. I really like how Colleen Hoover wrote female relationships in this book, because her dad is like married and he has like a stepdaughter, and he introduces them, and damn, if I say and again, he introduces them, and you would think that they would hate each other just because how it started off, but they actually start to form a bond and they start to like really like each other. And I just love how that was written. Like I love, like, we're stepping back from like this girl hate thing in like romance books and we're like doing like girls supporting, and I thought it was like really cool. But the romance itself was very bland to me. It's something about Colleen Hoover romance books that are just they're very bland. It's like she has really great ideas, but she's not a good romance writer, I don't think. I think she should try another genre. Then I have Indigo Ridge, which was a romance suspense. Oh, I got stuck. So it's a romance suspense, and it is about this girl who becomes a police officer, what are they called? Sheriff, chief, cop propaganda, I don't know. So she becomes like a police officer and for this small town, and this town is like ruled by the Edens. They're not ruled by, but they're like the founders of this town, the Edens. So the Edens are like everywhere, and there is this suicide that happens, and the main character knows it's not a suicide, and it happens on Indigo Ridge, which is the barn owned by the Edens. So it follows that, and then the love interest works at, he is an Eden, so it follows that. I thought this book was okay. I think if I would have never read her other novels under Willa Nash, I would have liked this book a lot more. But I'm starting to think like I kept comparing the books, and like it's very similar to the other series that she had, like The Bribe or whatever it's called. It's very similar to that. Like it feels like she's writing the same plot lines over and over under a different name, because she wants like this suspense thing or like this small town romance already, because I'm going to do a small town romance recommendations, and it's like I like the book, but kind of felt almost as if a carbon copy of her other book. And like, I liked the romance in the beginning, but then once they got together, I kind of just didn't care anymore, because they kind of got together a little fast, I think. And I really liked their relationship at first, because it's like he didn't want to like her and she didn't want to like him, but they couldn't like stay away from each other, and I really liked the idea of that. But then it's like they got together and I got bored, and then the mystery was solved in the end, and I was like, yay, so fun. So yeah. And then I read The Grownup by the same author who wrote Gone Girl. It was like crazy, but I gave it 3 stars because I was a little bored along the way. It was good still, but there was like a part, literally the parts from the beginning to the end were kind of like boring in the middle, so I was kind of just like whatever. But the ending was like crazy, and I did have fun reading it. Next I read Zodiac Academy. I read like 3 Zodiac Academy. So I read Zodiac Academy, Origins of an American Bully, and that's like here, and then it's Zodiac Academy, and then it's Zodiac Academy 2. So Zodiac Academy, Origins of the Bully is a prequel actually. I think I read it at the most perfect time. I read it right between book 2 and book 3, which I think is like a really good time to read it, because I feel like if you go into like, there's not like it's not like a spoiler, but it's like a good like mystery aspect of like why these characters act the way that they do. So I think if you read it within the second, before the 3rd book, it's really perfect, because it's like now you're like, oh, that's why they act like that, you know. Like, anyway, so Zodiac Academy I have read before. I'm actually doing a reading vlog on it. I'm doing a reading vlog on the whole series. I'm only on book 3 though. I was like zooming through it, but then books get bigger as you go along, and I'm like, damn. So Zodiac Academy, this book I gave, I would say like a high 3 stars, like 3.75. So I have read this book before. I read this book last June actually, and I didn't really like it when I read it. Like, it was like okay. I still had it at 3 stars, but it was like okay to me. But as you guys know, when I left, I got into like tarot cards and astrology and things like that when I was off, or when I wasn't filming for about like 3-4 months. I was like, you know, learning tarot and like astrology. I know a lot of astrology facts. If y'all want to know anything about yourselves, please DM me. I love teaching people astrology. I have no problem, please. You can even comment like your sun, moon, and rising, and I can tell you some things about yourself if you're interested in that. But yeah, so I read this book, and now that I'm into astrology, I have a newfound love for the series. I need to tell you guys what the series is about. This series is about these 2 twins named Tori and Darcy. They are Gemini, poor. They just graduated high school. They have no money. They're like doing strange for a little change. Okay, no, they're not. One girl's like stealing cars and motorcycles and stuff. Then this guy ends up coming. He's like, actually, y'all are princesses of the Fae. Y'all are the long lost princesses. You can come to this school called Zodiac Academy. I know that the zodiac aspect kind of confuses people, because it kind of has nothing to do with anything. The series actually has a lot going on. So Fae is their like what their species. They're like like you can be a Fae, like you. Fae is their species, but you can be like a werewolf, a vampire, things like that. So Fae isn't like fairies. It's like their entire species as a whole. And then when you go to the school, it's literally a carbon copy of Hogwarts. I'm not gonna lie, the school. And sometimes it kind of reads as like fan fiction of Harry Potter, but it's like updated within the best ways. Like, I kind of like how the school is like, they're both Geminis, obviously they're twins, so like they get horoscopes like every morning, which I think is cool. They have houses, so you can be like water, air, earth, fire. You can either be one, you can be 2 or more, you can be 1 or 2, and then the more you have, the more powerful you are. And then obviously like they're the main characters, so they have like all 4, and they have to pick like one to be in. And that part kind of confuses me, because like, so the thing that confuses people, and as well as me, is like, what does the zodiac signs have to do with anything? Because like, they get horoscopes every day, yeah, and like Gemini is an air sign, but they don't go to house of air because they're Gemini. Like, kind of their zodiacs have nothing to do with anything, to be honest. But I really like it. They talk about astrology a lot, and I really like that. For my 4-star ratings, I have Zodiac Academy book 2, Ruthless Fae. I ripped the cover when I was getting it out the package. Like, I just full on like ripped the cover like an idiot. But this one I gave 4 stars. I really loved it. And this one, I love this one because like I don't really care about the romance. The romances aren't terrible. Also, sorry, this is a bully romance. I love bully romances, so if you don't like bully romances, then like it's really not gonna make sense to you. And like these are kind of bully romances where they try to kill each other, like they're literally trying to kill her, like, but that's what bully romances do. Like I've read a lot of bully romances, so that kind of like was nothing new to me. But this book, I really liked it because in this book they talk about house placements, and a lot of people who are into astrology, like they just know the basics, like they know like star signs and things like that, but there's more to astrology than just star signs. There's house placements, which I am learning it, but I pretty much know a lot. Like with astrology, you're always learning things, but like a lot of people don't, when they talk about astrology, they don't talk about house placements. And I feel like house placements, planets, and star signs, they all are intertwined. Like once you know your house places, it explains more about your life and things like that. So they started talking about house placements in this book, and I thought this was like really good because obviously they were correct about it, and like these authors really know their shit when it comes to astrology. So I basically read these books for like the astrology aspects. There is a romance in this book that is like a forbidden love, and it's not the kind of forbidden love I usually like, but I like it in this book. Like I'm obsessed with it. So there's that. Then we have a book I never thought I would have on here, Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us. This one is it's not a romance book, it's a contemporary novel. It is about this girl who meets, it's a dual, well it's not really a dual timeline, but it's about this girl and her father just dies, and her father was abusive to her mother, and she grew up watching this abuse, and then she ends up like falling in love with this guy, and she ends up suffering from that like abuse. And she also ends up finding these letters to Ellen that she used to write about this guy that when she was younger. His name was Atlas. Everyone loves him, and she's just reminiscing. And I made that sound really boring, but I really like this book. It was such a heavy book. When the love interest was introduced, like, well, not the love interest, but the guy who's like abusive was introduced, I thought he was an ass. Like he literally asked for sex, like they had just met and he was asking for sex, and I thought that was like really creepy. And like he was always begging for sex, and I thought it was so creepy. Like I thought he was so creepy, but other than that, he was fine. Like that's how they get you. And obviously like they get married, and then he like the abuse happens, which that's how they get you, you know. Men, there's something about men where they act normal and fine, and then once you get married, like once they have you trapped, that's when the abuse starts. And I really enjoyed this book because it has such a good depiction on abuse. I grew up in an abusive household, so it's kind of like I was the main character, but not at the same time, because like you know the signs of abuse and you see it and you think, oh, this couldn't happen to me because I know the signs, but it's like it doesn't. And like even in the book, like the way that she wrote the guy, and like how like she, like the main character couldn't leave him, and like even how like he would apologize to her, or how he became vulnerable at her with the perfect moment so that she wouldn't leave, and all this stuff. About sex, I don't want to put my personal business out here, but I want to let you guys know why I connected with the story so much. I didn't care about the romance when I read it, especially because I kind of knew, I was trying to figure out how it was gonna happen, because like it just threw me off. So I didn't like, I'm thinking like, oh, like this romance, like, oh, okay, like whatever, it's kind of boring, not gonna lie. But I'm trying to figure out where the abuse come from, because I didn't really read the synopsis and I wanted myself to be surprised. So then when it happened, I was like, oh, because I didn't expect the abuse to happen to the main character. I thought like she would be like her mom, like she would find like, well, when she was looking for the letters, she would find something from her mom or something like that. But no, and like I did really like that. I don't think I'll read It Starts With Us because I don't really care about Colleen Hoover's romances. So this was actually my last book of the month that I read, and I really like that because I ended the month off in a bang, and that is Birds of California. So I have been looking for romance books that I can read for the summer because I am very lonely right now. I need some romance books to pick me up, and like I love romance. And so Birds of California is about this girl who was on this show, and the show was called Birds of California when she was a kid, and she's grown up now, and they want to bring the show back for a reboot. And she ends up getting lunch with her ex co-star, who was her brother, and then they form like this, well, her on-screen brother, because then if I would have said the next line, y'all would have been like, what, but he's our own screen brother, and then they actually end up forming a romance. And I loved the banter between these two characters. Like, it was so funny. Like, they were always heckling each other, and it was just so good. I will say trigger warning for grooming, and she doesn't want to bring this show back, and like, you're trying to figure out. I think the interesting part for me is because I read someone else's book review, and they told me, they said like, oh, the trigger warning, there's a trigger warning for grooming. And so I kept reading this book, and I was trying to figure out like, where does the grooming come in? And I thought that that was like interesting for me, because it's like I was trying to figure out this thing. It's kind of like a little mystery, even though it's not. And I really like this book. Like I said, I like the banter between the two, and it has a lot of pop culture references, but I didn't mind that. And then it referenced my favorite sitcom of all time, The Community, where they said something about 6 seasons in a movie, and like only like die hard Community stans like know that thing. Like, that is like a thing between like the Community fandom, and it meant the world to me. So I had to give it 4 stars just off that line alone. But I really love the romance. It was super fun. It was super quick. It's like 270 pages. So fast. You could literally read this in a day. It was so fun. Then I have Crescent City 2, House of Sky and Breath, which I never thought I would like. But I watched Kari Can Read's video on this. I watched 4 hours of her. I mean, that's nothing new. I've literally watched her all day long. But I watched her Crescent City first book, and then this one. And the way this book sounded, it sounded so fun, and like the ending had me gagged. It had me gagged. I had to read it for myself. I know I've had my problems with Sarah J Maas, and I have called her out for being problematic, but you guys know that like I'm very curious, and even when I talk about someone, for some reason like I just have to like find out for myself. Still also don't know how I want to go about the art versus the artist thing. Like, I really don't know how I want to go about that. So, you know, I'm a hypocrite. I'll say that. I am. But I love this book, so I wasn't gonna hide it. I'm very honest. Like, I could have just not talked about this book. I could have just rated 5 stars and not talked about it, whatever. But I'm a very honest person, and I didn't want to hide this from you guys. So yes, I read House of Sky and Breath. I gave it 5 stars. I actually want to do a reread of this series because I love this book so much. This follows the events of Crescent City, which if you somehow live under a rock and you've never read Crescent City before, Crescent City is this thing. Don't read the synopsis because you will get spoiled, but something huge happens, a huge mystery, and the main character, Bryce Quinlan, ends up having to work with Hunt, who is a cop propaganda, and they have to work together to solve this mystery. That sounds really boring, but it's Sarah J Maas, so you know it's never really boring. And this book follows the events of that. This book also has its mystery of its own. Actually, I feel like I can talk about the plot of this book because it kind of has nothing to do with the plot of the first book, low-key. So there is this kid that has gone missing, and so Thorian, I hope I pronounced his name right, he comes to seek help from Bryce and the gang to help him find this kid. And so it's like another like mystery thing, and I liked it. I love the friend groups in this book. I love the characters. Ethan, Tharion, Rune, what's his name that I literally love? I cannot believe I forgot his name. He's the ginger. I love him. I love them. Hypaxion, the Hunt. I loved her. I'm sorry. She had the girls gagged and I ate it up. What can I say? I loved her. So like, I loved all like the tight-knit friend group, the found family. Sarah J Maas was really good with like tight-knit friend groups and found family, I will say that. And I just had so much fun. I did read the book, by the way. I don't think I ever said that. Obviously I read the book. After I watched Kari Can Read video, I had to like swoop and like read this because it was just so fun. And like, I don't really care about Bryce and Hunt. It's something about Sarah J Maas's main romances that I'm always just like, besides like, you know, Farrah and Reason. But it's something about her main characters that I just don't, I don't hate her, but like the other characters are better. And also in this book, Bryce does a lot of like off-camera stuff, off the page stuff, and like that kind of irritates me, but whatever. And this book follows, I think I like this book a lot because it follows characters that's not Bryce, and I don't really care for her. So it kind of was like, oh, this book is heavy. I'm sorry, I have to put it down. So like, I don't know, that was like good for me. My highest rated 5-star has to be Firestarter by Stephen King. I read this book for Friday the 13th. I actually finished it the day before Friday the 13th, but you know, if you don't know me, Friday the 13th is my favorite day of the year. I'm a spooky girl. I love spooky stuff. Friday the 13th is my favorite time of the year. I feel like it's my luckiest day of the year, to be honest. Everyone else feels unlucky, and like for some reason I feel super lucky. And so to celebrate Friday the 13th, I read Firestarter. I did have to work that day, which sucked, but Firestarter the movie also came out, and I thought that the movie was gonna be like super good and like everyone was gonna like it and it was gonna be like the next It, but everyone hated it. It's like the lowest rated movie like on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, not the lowest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a really low Rotten Tomatoes rating, and apparently the movie sucked. I watched a movie commentary on it by one of my favorite movie commentary people. I can't remember her name at the moment, but yeah, and the movie was ass. But anyways, it's not about the movie, this is about the book. So this book is about this girl, and she can start fires. Like, she has this power to start fires, and one day these people come looking for her, and they like kill her mom. So her and her dad are like on the run, and her dad also has a power called the Push, where he can like basically control people, but he can't use the power as much. And I thought this book was really good. Stephen King is really good at writing children. Like, whatever book he has where he writes children are pretty much like, I think all of his books where he wrote children are like my top 3 books. Like, I don't know why, especially children with powers. I actually wish Stephen King would write more books with powers. He has a book coming out in September called Fairy Tales, which is like portal magic, and I am so excited for that because I think that also was like with a kid. But he's just like really good at writing children. When I read this book, I remember I was like so happy. I'm like, yeah, the N-word hasn't been said, and then 40 minutes later he said the N-word. Stephen King has to put the N-word in all of his books for some reason. I don't think he's racist, but I don't know why he does that. I don't know. But nonetheless, I kind of just am like, I don't want to ignore it. I don't really know how to talk about it because like I really love the book. But if I rated his books, if I took off a rating for his books for having the N-word, I would never have a high rating book, basically. But I love this book. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.